I'll take you back to the Stone Age. Here's my whiteboard brainstorming. And I came up with 5 archetypes. The sovereign leader, the warrior implementer, the wizard alchemist, the lover romantic, and the priest holy man. And those were their five archetypes that'll be part of the quiz. So the quiz hook is, what kind of mature masculine are you? And we'll ask them a series of little questions that will determine whether they tend more to being a warrior, a king, a magician, a lover, or a priest.
Yeah, but don't you move around?
Well, you do, but you know that's what a quiz is. It's just a hook, right? It's just a marketing gateway. It says, you know, because everybody, the kind of human psychology behind quizzes is that very human feature called "Tell me more about me."
Yeah, I think you know, I'd like to respond to your question, Jeff, because I think I have a slightly different hit on that. It's not really a question of moving around, at least the way I see it. Just pick one of those, Matthew. Just pick one of them that you like there.
Let's go with priest holy man.
Priest holy man. To me, I really like the way the Man Alive approached these things. They would take the archetypes. Actually, they would take the roles, and they would take the archetypes and they would call them roles, and then they would take specific attributes of those roles and call them behaviors. So you have so they would distinguish between the like they would have the king, but then what would the behavior of the king be? The dismissing king, or the violent king, or the good king, or the bad, you know. So it was so the king was the archetype, and then there was the behavior. And see, the idea is that the archetype does not evolve, but the behavior does. So you have. So what was that? What was your example again of the one you gave me? The one you just said was the
priest holy man.
Right. So I don't know which of those was the archetype and which of those is the behavior, but you pick one as the archetype, and call it the priest, and then it is the holy man who is the behavior, because there's also, of course, the evil priest.
Right.
And there's all different
priest.
The evil priest, sure. The
I
manipulate.
the evil nun.
The what?
Evil nun.
Yeah, there are those too.
Yeah, but the idea is that the priest doesn't evolve, but the behavior does, because the priest is the archetype. The priest exists, and we only know the archetype through the images that we have of the archetype. We never know the archetype. We only know the archetype through the images. So the priest is dressed in a habit, or carries a book of prayer, or wears a certain religious iconographic images that are around him. And that's the priest. And the holy man is just one of his behavioral types. There's also the priest who is maybe the husband, you know, who might also be he might also have other behaviors. So yeah, there's all kinds of. That's the way I found this to be very, very helpful in my study of these things.
Right. Right. I think that's beautiful. And yeah, my sense of move around is that we are all of these 5 things. You know, we all have all of the archetypes in us to some extent or another. But we have a strong suit, strengths and weaknesses patterns, right? And so I'm just sharing with you here what are considered buckets. The sovereign leader, the warrior implementer, the wizard alchemist, the lover romantic, and the priest shaman. And when we go down here, I'm just scrolling through. Here's a sovereign leader, knows his own heart and mind, can consult with wise advisors, can become a tyrant despot if unconscious. The warrior implementer is decisive, precise, loyal, and aware, but can fall into the trap of soldiering on and just following orders. The wizard alchemist is a brilliant innovator and genius and can guide and facilitate transformation at a deep level, but if unwise and selfish, can turn into dark magic sorcerer. The lover romantic is devoted to the arts and music and poetry and design and can be honest and deep and emotionally aware, but he can fall into the trap of being a seducer and a Don Juan. And the priest holy man, truly connected to a higher power and divine grace, this man can tap into great mystery for the benefit of all, but may fall into being holier than thou.
So what I want to talk about with this, Matthew, is not so much your like marketing program for this, although that's interesting to me, but what I want to talk about with this is you. Scroll back up a little bit, because I have some comments about you and these particular things. First off,
Sure.
I think this is that the level and the degree of introspection and self-awareness that you've put into creating this is profound. I just really honor it, and I think it's actually a really powerful initiatory kind of reflection that you've done on yourself. So the second thing I would say is that the place where I would be interested in you is to say, where is to now go back in your life 10 years and ask yourself, where you know, you are today a wizard alchemist, and you also are today a genius, but you also have dark magic and sorcerer energy. The question is, when did you come on to that? Like, what was the age? How old were you when this archetype first appeared, and what was it, and how have you evolved in through several initiations? Because in order to get where you are today with it, I believe you actually and I'm going to guess that probably there would be a version of the wizard alchemist who existed when you were a teenager, and there was
totally.
a different version that existed when you were in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s,
Right.
and your 50s. And what's really happening is you're preparing for the next 10 years. You're preparing for the next step of the wizard alchemist, and also recognizing that the wizard alchemist, that this dark magic sorcerer piece, these were different pieces these were energetically different parts of the evolution through which you have gone through various stages of initiation. And that there probably is, like I said, I'm not sure which of these are, I'm not sure whether the wizard or the alchemist is the behavioral type.
The behavior, right.
But what I would say is the behavior is really a brilliant innovator and genius and a guide, and then it's unwise, selfish, turning to dark magic. Those are the two behavioral
Yes.
patterns that I would say are part of the alchemist. And what you're calling the wizard is the brilliant innovator. And what I would say is that there's also the cunning man, or the
Right.
the charlatan maybe is also is also a wizard.
Right.
I mean, also an alchemist. So the wizard is actually just a behavioral type, a brilliant innovator, a genius. And the question is when the wizard evolves, what does he do? What does he become next? Next,
Right.
does the brilliant innovator become does he become the creator, or what does he do? I mean, what is his innovation? What does he innovate? This is innovative. This is a very brilliant innovation. I just feel like you kind of nailed yourself, Matthew. I mean,
Yeah.
and I mean that in a loving, beautiful way. You've exposed yourself, well, to yourself, really. I mean, you're sharing it with us, but you've exposed yourself to what I think is a really great template for where you're heading in the next 10 or 15 years of your life, which
Right.
I think is really a very powerful tool. Now, whether or not, the thing about it is, I think that for any man to actually benefit from this, they'd actually have to go through the same self-introspection. You can't teach this shit to anybody. In fact, I can only talk with you about it because I've done it. I actually have done. I've got my 4 dudes. They're my four life patterns that I've traced back to, like, I can trace them back to about age 9, 10, and 11 when they first started appearing.
Uh-huh.
And I've traced them forward into through each decade of my life, through very specific circumstances and experiences that initiated me into the next step, so that each step I became the next piece. And who I am today is, in fact, this long train of evolving behaviors within these archetypals, which are which the new warriors actually have a pretty good. It's a pretty, just those 4 are pretty hip. The warrior, the king, the lover, and the magician. They're not quite perfect for me, but they're pretty doggone close. And I've never found a need to. I have at times thought there were only 3, but I've never really gone to 5. I mean, I just felt like 4 was kind of the number that kind of felt right, that I could track and keep kind of tracking and following. Anyway.
Right. Well, this is where it, to me, gets interesting, because I appreciate input from all of you guys. It's not that I would ever teach these things. It's more about revealing these as windows into self-awareness. So a man would self-identify based on his own awareness of his own journey.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right? And then through various, obviously what we've done in the last year, read Iron John, read Black Elk, read Prechtel. We're planning to move on to read in some John Lee. We're using these as tools and guides to provoke our own awareness around our archetypal makeup, as well as the behaviors that each of those archetypal aspects of self are expressing as. So a quiz funnel, which is what I'm creating here, is a free quiz that a man would answer a bunch of questions, and at the end he would get a little outcome printout that describes him. And it should ultimately be so brilliant that it nails him. Right? And also be a little bit like the Sunday horoscope, where it kind of it's general enough that it fits just about everybody, but it's because it's a self-reflective mechanism. How reliable is the man at viewing who he is, and how can we reflect that back to him? So this outcome of the quiz, that's what this row called the Band-Aid is. Because the first thing you want to do is, I want to take a quiz to find out whether I'm a a sovereign leader, a warrior implementer, blah, or etc. Right? And then when I find out, my results come out and say, oh, you are a warrior implementer. That means you're decisive and precise and you're loyal and you're aware. And this needs a little more fleshing out, but you can fall into the trap of soldiering on or just following orders. So they get aware of where their, good qualities are and where their shadow tricky parts are.
Matthew, okay, so here I have another question for you, Matthew.
Yeah.
Why are you trying to reinvent the wheel? I mean, first off, Myers-Briggs kind of already did this. and indeed, the Enneagram really, I mean, most people who read like a basic introduction to the Enneagram have this reaction of somewhat like, holy fuck, how did they get me?
Exactly.
How did they get me? And the thing about it is the Enneagram was obviously created with, I mean, all I can say is it's channeled shit because it's just so incredible. I feel like this is such a personal thing, Matthew. It's like you're inventing your own Enneagram.
So,
And I'm just questioning, like, why not just use one that already exists?
Well, that's what's interesting, Gordon, is because one, I want to craft it specifically toward a male audience, a mature male audience. So I'm using masculine archetypes only. The other thing is that, interestingly enough, the people who took the Enneagram, they also took the Myers-Briggs, and they also took the blankety blank and the blankety blank. People have usually taken about 4, 5, 6, or 7 different character profile quizzes.
Yeah, personality.
Yeah,
you can find them
because we're
online.
just voracious for this shit.
Yeah.
So, I'm not trying to replace the Enneagram. I'm not trying to do better than Robert Moore and King Magician Warrior Lover. I'm just creating a little spin with a little intrigue that can hook into that human characteristic of curiosity. I'd like to know more about me. And if I can then give them an outcome that intrigues them enough and nails them, they go, wow, this guy's got something interesting to share. And then the Band-Aid pivots to the cure.
What is the Band-Aid?
Well, this is some jargon from marketing, all right? If you take a quiz, you want to know the answer. And so the answer is, okay, oh, you're a priest holy man, Jeff, which means you are truly connected to a higher power and connected to divine grace, and you can tap into the great mystery for the benefit of all. And I really acknowledge that in you, but truth is, you might fall into a trap of being maybe a righteous asshole. Huh?
What does Band-Aid got to do? I understand the bucket, but I don't understand the word Band-Aid.
Okay. A Band-Aid is something you give for free.
What?
When the kid hurts their finger, he comes calling to mommy. Mommy, can I have a Band-Aid? Mommy, can I have a Band-Aid? And mommy gives him a Band-Aid and a kiss. But what heals the wound is something a little more than just a Band-Aid. It's a jargon term, Jeff. Am I getting to it at all for you?
No, I don't. The Band-Aid hasn't really landed with me at all. The bucket, your explanation of the bucket and the dark side of the bucket, that makes sense. But Band-Aid just is a funny word for me.
Well, I think this is, again, what the marketer here who created this approach is attempting to describe. That when somebody takes a free quiz, the first thing they really expect is, okay, that's an interesting piece of information I just gave you. You're a priest holy man. And you go, wow, that's cool. What do I do with that? I'm gonna give you, and this is where people don't know that they need the cure. They think they want the Band-Aid, right? So you give people a Band-Aid when you first share the quiz results. Then you help them see why that's not the full picture. You see what I'm saying there?
Mm-hmm.
Your cure is what you're selling. So if I want to position this, so I'm going to offer a 1-year training program to men so that they can drop deep into their archetypal and behavioral characteristics to improve and uplift themselves as men, I'm going to have to pitch it.
So Matt, so here's what I think about this, Matthew, which is, I mean, this is very interesting. First off, I actually enjoy talking about this stuff. But to me, the target audience, you say the target audience is men, but actually, I don't think it's mature men. I don't actually think that that's correct. I actually think that it's mature men who have a certain psychological profile, which I would say is characterized by a specific type of existential crisis, and the existential crisis is that underlies this is my life is meaningless, and or more correctly, I've gone through my life and now life looks meaningless. It's like there's no absolute anything in the world. There's nothing is true except for and I'm lost now. I'm lost in a kind of an existential crisis, and I have decided that I'm going to reflect my way out of it. And what I've come to the conclusion is that the way out of meaninglessness is to fulfill my potential. That is the solution to the existential crisis that I discovered, that I've had probably all my life. And it's really only one of maybe 3 or 4 existential crises, because the other one is, death, and I'm afraid of dying, or the realization that the realization of isolation, maybe, that I'm just an individual, and that there's no real anything that goes on inside anybody else that I'm not actually connected with anybody. I'm actually just my own self, and that's the only person I am. And then, of course, the one other one that's existential is freedom, because when you are free, you are responsible for your own life, and so people do not want to be free. So you've come up with one solution to one prong of, like, what I call the 4-prong existential crisis of the modern world, the 4 existential crises of the modern world. And that's why I see your piece as being very particular to Matthew, because it is, I would say that what you are, Matthew, is a man struggling with his existential crisis, and that your solution is to fulfill your potential, and that will give your life meaning, and it's cool. I'm all down with that. But I'm also recognizing it's not the only one. It's not the only game in town.
Oh no, absolutely not. Yeah, I agree.
I don't know if that answered your question about band.
Right. No, but what it does is it kind of sharpens up the target market to not just mature men, but mature men who are lost, or mature men who are on some level of recognition of crisis, some recognition of the meaninglessness of life, and that is an existential threat.
Yeah,
causes them to.
Yeah, I totally get that. I mean, that's why I've done all this work that you've done, Matthew, to create these buckets and whatnot. I'm there with you. I spent reflective hours and thousands
Right.
of introspective hours, just like tracking my psychological development for this exact reason.
And this is where I wrote this piece. And if you may bear with me a little bit more, I'll just read through this. And so this is where I pivot from what's called the Band-Aid to the cure. So a man is made up of intermingling parts of shadow and light. When he is in the light, he is growing and developing himself in body, mind, emotions, and spirit for the good of himself, his family, and all mankind. There's